Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Bruce Buffington.
And I'm Ann Morrow.
This is Cycology Today, and it's brought to you by Northwest Bicycle Safety Council. Our definition of psychology is the science of propelling oneself safely through the environment to enhance well-being.
And we'd like to take this opportunity to thank Baja Fresh for providing a great dinner for our volunteer crew this evening.
Yes, we work with an all-volunteer crew, no one with Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, which is a nonprofit organization. None of us get paid, and none of us get paid for doing this show. And we do it because we are all interested in an educational outreach about saving lives. Now, it looks like we have a pretty good lineup today, and we have a representative from the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway. Hope I said that right. And we have officers Mark Barrowcliff and James Patrick from the Beaverton Police Department's Bicycle Patrol. We also have Tony Montez. Tony is a member of the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council's Advisory Board and a member of the Beaverton Optimist Club. So what do you say we get started, Ann?
Okay, Bruce. I've got some guests here this evening. I've got Kristen Stallman from the Oregon Department of Transportation. And she's going to talk to us about the historic Columbia River Highway. And we've got Ed Lewis here this evening, and he is a member of the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway. And some of you may not know anything about that organization or what we're talking about, and that's why we're having these guests this evening. And primarily, too, that the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway are putting on a bike ride in June, and that's what kind of this is all leading up to. We're going to talk about the history of the old historic highway, and we're going to talk about the restoration and the connecting the old highway and what that's all about. And then we're going to talk about the bicycle ride itself and encourage all of you to get out there and do that bicycle ride. So we're going to kind of start with Kristen, because Kristen is going to be our historian this evening. Kristen, first let's start out. You work with ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation. What's your role with them?
Well, I think I probably have the best job in ODOT. I'm the ODOT's Scenic Area Coordinator here in Region 1, which is the Portland metropolitan area. And it goes all the way out to Hood River and includes Washington County and Columbia County. But my job in the Department of Transportation, one major component is working on the historic Columbia River Highway, which is a fabulous resource that's right in our own backyard. And so I encourage anybody in the area, especially if you like to go bike riding, to go out and experience the highway.
Yeah, I think here in the Portland metro area, we think to Multnomah Falls, maybe, and that's about as far east as maybe we think about, and a lot of us do ride there. And we're going to get educated this evening that it goes beyond that, and we can actually ride our bikes, and in the future, hopefully, we'll have all the way from Troutdale to what, the Dalles, is that right? That's the objective. So why don't you tell us, how did this get started? Why are we doing this? Why are we restoring this area?
Well, like I said, the historic highway is a fabulous historic resource that's right in our backyard. And efforts to restore the highway started back in the 1980s when actually it started in Hood River. The old Hood River Bridge was destroyed. A lot of the residents there were quite upset. They restored this beautiful bridge. And the highway is renowned for its bridges and its design. And so when people saw the highway being destroyed piecemeal, well, it started as early in the 30s and then through the 50s, but pieces of the highway have been destroyed over time. People said, no, this has got to stop. This is an important resource. We need to protect it. So in the 1980s, when the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Act was in play, that legislation directed the state, the Oregon Department of Transportation, to develop a plan for preservation. And that's how my organization, the Oregon Department of Transportation, gets involved in the historic highway.
I see.
And I might add that there's also a state statute that does the same thing, that recognizes the need to restore and reconnect the highway.
I see, because I was thinking it was just the Friends, you know, an organization, a nonprofit organization doing this, but it's actually mandated.
And that state statute not only directs ODOT, but it also directs the Tourism Commission, as well as state parks, and then the 3 counties all work cooperatively. And that's my role. I'm staffed to an Historic Columbia River Advisory Committee. That's a 10-member group that oversees all projects related to the highway.
So, let's see, I think I wanted to ask, how exactly is ODOT involved then? They're mandated
Yeah.
by statute,
Well-
and what are they doing? Do they do the hard
Yeah,
labor?
well, we do the maintenance. You know, we're out there on the road, we're out there maintaining it. So it's important that we do that in a careful area, and to kind of bring the viewers into kind of where is the highway. You hear us talk about the historic highway. To kind of set that up a little bit, the historic highway parallels I-84 between Troutdale and the Dalles, and it was actually, if you don't know, it's one of the most significant roads in the United States. It actually is the first scenic highway built in the United States. It was built in 1913, it was started, and it was built as a scenic highway. So if you think back in time and think what was happening in that turn of the century, early time, cars were new. People didn't have cars, but the roads were really bad, they were really muddy, so there was this effort. A lot of the effort to develop good roads was actually the bicyclists, because bicycling was so popular at that time. But there's this effort to get people out in their cars, and they designed this highway to not only connect places, you know, get from point A to point B. They wanted to connect people to the beauty spots when they laid out the highway. So today when you go on the highway, you really don't even know you're on a highway. I mean, it doesn't seem like a highway, it's very narrow, but the highway as you're driving, or riding your bike in this case, frames these views of this spectacular gorge and the waterfalls, the views, the mountain vista. It really brings you closer to nature. And you don't even realize you're driving. And that's why I think today, why we take all our families and friends out to Vista House, Multnomah Falls, and all the way out to Hood River and the Dalles on the other sections of the highways, because it's such an experience. It's where driving is still fun. You know, it's like where you go out and have fun, but it also is perfect for bicyclists. When it was designed, the engineer Samuel Lancaster and the entrepreneur Sam Hill wanted to design a highway that would bring the visitors where those old Model T Fords and those old cars couldn't go up steep hills. So you'll find it's all 5% grades, has design standards, and has 100-foot radiuses. So you have these perfect curves that traverse the gorgeous, really rugged terrain, but it's perfect today if you're on a bicycle because you don't have any steep slopes. It's like you have really gentle curves. So today, if you're a cyclist, I really encourage you to get out on the highway because it's a real treat. We are so lucky that it's so close to us, and it's right in our backyard, and so it's a fabulous resource.
It is, and I think that's why we wanted to share this information, because this is a gem that we have in our backyard, just as you're saying, and so we want to support it and help develop it for ourselves as well as tourists.
And an important point about that is that it was the first scenic highway in the United States. We have that here in Oregon.
So we had talked about Vista House is part of this restoration project. Is that right? And that's now restored and really spectacular. If you haven't been out there for several years, it's worth going out again.
Yeah, and the restoration is more than just the structures. If you go out along the highway, it's the you'll notice there's a guardrail, a white painted guardrail that is really unique. It's the historic guardrail that's been restored. It meets the ODOT's crash safety test, so it's steel backed, but it really connects you with the historic feeling of being on the road. You'll see all the historic rock walls that have been restored over time. And this is on the drivable portions. And I think really what I want to get across today is that we have 26 miles of drivable portions between Troutdale and Warrendale, which is a little bit before Cascades Locks as you're going to I-84. But there's a huge section, a longer section from Warrendale through Cascade Locks. Well, there's actually portions of the old highway in Cascade Locks, but then between Cascade Locks and Hood River, that a lot of the highway there has been obliterated or was bypassed. Some of the highway, and I think Ed's going to talk a little bit more about that, just sits in the woods right off of I-84 that people don't know. The same beautiful highway you drive on to get up to Vista House is in the woods right parallel. So as you're driving down I-84 next time, look off to your right, as you're headed towards Hood River. You can see remnants of the old highway back there. And so our agency and our group, the Historic Columbia River Highway Advisory Committee, in partnership with the Friends, is really trying to work hard to raise awareness, let people know that this resource is there, it's significant, and that we want to reconnect not only as Ed's going to talk about the trail, the sections of the trail, but we want to reconnect the communities and the people that live along the highway that really enjoy it with its historical significance.
Now, do you have special crews on ODOT that work on this? Because it seems like it would be a special craftsman having to restore some of this if you have damage or something. Do you have special crews out there?
We do, and it's in partnership with our other agencies with ODOT. The right-of-way line and state parks intermingle in the gorge, so you'll have a rock wall failure at Vista House. Will be on state parks property, and they'll work with a craftsman to restore the wall. But ODOT has its own crews that are really sensitive to how they restore and protect the historic integrity of this resource. So they're actually, if you go out there today, another partner we have is Western Federal Lands Highway. They restored the gutters, the historic gutters. They were covered up over years, the dirt and leaves and everything filled them in, and we recently went out and rebuilt the historic concrete gutters that were out there when the road was built. Actually, a lot of them were there. They were just buried underneath all this dirt. Cleared them out, resealed them, and so today when you go on the drivable portions, you'll notice this new gutter system, which is actually the old gutter system. So it's really cool.
I want to take this opportunity to mention the website for the Historic Columbia River Highway, so hcrh.org. There's a lot of great photographs on that site, a lot of history and information, and so I think viewers should, if you have internet access, look at HCRH, Historic Columbia River Highway, and take a look and kind of reinforce some of the things that you're saying. Now, some of the tunnels, I know the Mosier tunnels are now opened up to us, but those had been literally filled in, isn't that right, with rocks and dirt?
Yeah, there's actually several tunnels along the highway that over time were closed or destroyed. One of the most famous tunnels, it was fabulous, it's like it breaks your heart when you think that they actually could go in and destroy it, was Mitchell Point, which is located just west of Hood River. It's right adjacent to I-84, but this was the tunnel that when Hill and Lancaster, the engineer and entrepreneur who had the vision for the historic highway, they went back to Europe in 1908, and roads again were new at this time, and they thought, they visited this tunnel, a new road in Switzerland called the Ochsenstrasse, and they had a 3-window tunnel, and it's really interesting to look, I'm sure it's on the website, pictures of the 3-window tunnel in Switzerland, and they came back and they decided we could outdo Switzerland. We're going to build a 5-window tunnel, and this tunnel was fabulous. But over time, as I-84 was built, and as people decided that they needed to go faster, and like our roads, our trucks got bigger, you just needed 84 became the goal. But it's hard to imagine that, to try to put yourself into perspective. The historic highway was the only way from points east, from Portland east to eastern and central Oregon, and for those folks from the Dalles or Pendleton to get into Portland. So we drive that road today and it's a little narrow road, but back then that was the only way. So it's great to hear some of the old timers talk about their stories of being car sick and remembering going in the old highway, and so it's kind of a really unique resource.
Ed, you're a member of the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway. So you're a member of that nonprofit organization, and you're trying to restore that highway that Kristen is telling us about, and
restore and reconnect.
And reconnect it. So although we won't be maybe driving our cars, we could hike it or we could ride our bikes.
Right.
Ultimately from Troutdale to the Dalles.
That's the goal, and that's the mission of our nonprofit organization. Our nonprofit organization, Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway, was organized and incorporated in August of 2006. So we've been around for a little less than 2 years. But our basic mission is to support the restoration and reconnection of the historic highway. We need to do that in partnership with ODOT and all the other governmental partners. Obviously we can't accomplish that by ourselves, but we're an independent group that's formed to support those activities. And again, our basic mission is to support the restoration and the reconnection. The reconnection involves reconnecting the drivable portions of the highway that Kristen's been talking about with hiking and biking trails. And some of that's already accomplished. 11 miles of hiking and biking trails have already been constructed, but there's still 12 miles left to complete. And there's also restoration work that needs to be accomplished, and those are the two big objectives of our group. Jeanette Close, who was scenic area coordinator for this area for over 20 years, recently retired. She's terribly knowledgeable about the historic highway, tremendous resource, and she's very passionate about the historic highway. She's the president of our organization. She's the driver that caused the organization to be put together. And we've got about 15 active people that are volunteering their services to support this cause.
So what the Mosier Tunnels is one example, isn't it, of something that the Friends have accomplished? What accomplishments have the Friends accomplished?
Well, the big thing that we've done is we had our first major fundraising activity, which was the Gorge Ride last June, and we raised over $20,000 in that activity. We're using that money to support our activity. One of the things that has already been mentioned here is the Mitchell Point area, which regretfully was basically destroyed as a part of all the changes. We are currently funding an effort to have a feasibility study look at whether or not it's appropriate or feasible to reopen the tunnel. It would have to be drilled again, but we're funding that activity to see if that's possible. The whole area of restoration reconnection is a fairly large endeavor. In I think it was the year 2000, ODOT did a study to try to determine what it would cost to do all the restoration and reconnection that's necessary. The estimates were somewhere between $45 and $50 million.
Yeah.
Substantial amounts of money. Both, as we've already mentioned here, both the state of Oregon and the federal government have recognized the desire for this to happen. There's federal legislation, there's state legislation. The problem is that there's been some funding, but not enough to cover all of this work. So that's part of what we're trying to do, is encourage fundraising for that. We're still going to have to look to the governments to provide most of the funding, but we're trying to facilitate that opportunity.
And I'd like just to add a little bit. When the highway was constructed, it was considered America's greatest highway. It was coined the king of roads. And so I think our vision is to create the king of trails. And I just want to ask your viewers to imagine what a resource this would be if you could ride your bike from Troutdale to the Dalles. Think about how wonderful that would be and who would come to do it, and what a great resource, because right now bicyclists are forced to use I-84, which is not pleasant for sections of the ride. So our goal is to get those cyclists off of the interstate.
And
Let's move on to the ride. I want our viewers to know about the Gorge Ride, which you said last year was the first year, and it's a fundraiser for the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway. We have some slides, some pictures of some of that route. And the ride this year in 2008 is on June 14th.
yes.
And what can you tell us about the ride, Ed?
Well, I can tell you a lot about the ride. But one other thing I wanted to mention is that getting back to sort of the restoration and reconnection, our goal is to have this accomplished by the year 2016. That's roughly 100 years from the time that the historic highway was dedicated. That's not really too far away, and there's a lot of work to do, but that's our goal. The Gorge Ride, as Ann mentioned, is on June 14th. It's a Saturday. This will be the second annual Gorge Ride. We held it last year. We had 370 riders last year. We got very good comments from people who rode. The ride, and there's our logo. You can buy a T-shirt with that logo on it as a part of the ride. The ride starts in the Dalles at the Columbia Gorge Discovery Center, and we ride on the historic highway from there to Mosier, through the Mosier Twin Tunnels, and then on to the Historic Highway State Trail to the Marco Hatfield West Trailhead, which is just east of the river. And then we ride back. It's a round trip of 38.5 miles. You've got tremendous scenery. You've got the Rowena Crest, which is a wonderful climb. It's got panoramic views of the whole Columbia Gorge. It's quite similar to the views that you see from Crown Point at the western end of the historic highway. One of the attractions of this ride is that we are highlighting the eastern end of the historic highway. Lots of people who live in the metropolitan area are familiar with the western part of the historic highway. Have probably ridden from Troutdale to Multnomah Falls. That's a beautiful ride. But a lot of people are not as familiar with the eastern section, and it's just as beautiful. There's tremendous scenery. And one of the real advantages of the eastern section is there's a lot of the historic highway state trail. And people are not real familiar with, well, what do you mean by a state trail? Well, what it is it's paved. Most of it 16 feet wide. It's up off the highway quite a ways, so you're away. On parts of it you don't even hear the highway I-84, and it's just a tremendously wonderful ride.
Yes, so we do ultimately want to encourage people to
Yes.
come out and do that ride. And again, you can go to hcrh.org for Historic Columbia River Highway and link to that and sign up online for the ride. I think, is it $40? I don't quite remember, Ed. And then I think you can pre-order a box lunch too to
Yes.
enjoy there in the Dalles after you complete the ride. So, and it is a fundraiser for this, and it's a great ride. And as Ed described, as a bicycle rider, those of us who have done the Troutdale to Multnomah Falls and back, this terrain is very similar. So as a bike rider, if you're capable of doing that ride here closer to the metro area, you're definitely able to do that. It's got the kind of, the Rowena Crest has the switchbacks and so forth. So it's very similar. It's kind of startling in a way.
There are other things that are part of this ride. You get to go through the Mosier Twin Tunnels, which is a real experience. There's also a rest stop at the Mayordale Estate, and that's a beautiful estate right along the highway. Last year, the Bing cherries were just coming online, and we were able to provide fresh Bing cherries to our riders. Hopefully we'll be able to do that again this year. On the registration, it's $30 is the base registration fee up until June 10th. After June 10th, it goes to $40. Registration is online. Again, our website is www.hcrh.org. And so you can go to the website, learn more about the ride, and also start the registration process. All our registration is online, and it takes you to Or Bike. That's our registration facility.
Well, thank you both,
Thank
Kristen
you.
and Ed. Thank you both for coming to join us this evening and telling us about this beautiful area and inviting us to that ride. And so I hope to see you out there on June 14th. We're going to go now to Tony Montez from the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, and he's got our event corner for this evening. Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you, Ann. In the event corner, we have the Beaverton Bicycle Safety Fair, which is on May 17th, and that runs from 10 a.m. to 2 o'clock. And the items they're going to have there is a bicycle safety inspection and maintenance, helmet fittings, medical alert sticker for your helmet. There's a skills obstacle course, and of course there'll be showing of safety DVDs and videos for everyone who's interested. We encourage all kids to come out and enjoy it. We've done this for many years. It's been sponsored by the Beaverton Police Department, the Beaverton PAL, and the Beaverton Optimist Club. Also, of course, the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council. It's a lot of fun, so coming out, kids really will enjoy this, so bring your kids out and make it a nice event. Also in the event corner is the Senior Rollers. And the Senior Rollers is a group of seniors starting at age 62 to, we have some members who are in their 70s. We go out on Monday mornings. Usually we start about 10 o'clock, and we take different routes. And the whole idea behind this is that we want seniors who need to go out and do some exercising. They could go out and take a ride with us. We usually take a ride and stop for coffee, and then we have lunch, and then we ride back. Sometimes we even take the Max back. The Senior Rollers actually is not limited to only those over 62. Anyone could come and join. So if you want to bring your kids that do bicycling, you could do that also. One of the things that we do is that we do not ride on the roads, meaning that we try to get away from going on roads that there's a lot of traffic. Most of the things we do is on trails. For example, we've done the Banks to Vernonia Trail all the way up to Stubbs Stewart Park. We don't do it beyond that because it's gravel and we have road bikes. We also have done the Rock Creek Trail from Bethany Village all the way into Hillsborough. We've also done a ride in Hillsborough out to Root Ridge Bridge Park and driven through that area also. And those are all on trails. We try to stress safety, and one of the things that we do, one of our rules is we ride as fast as the slowest person. So if you haven't been out on a ride and don't think you could do this, you can. Believe me. I could tell you my own story is that I only started just this last summer. I started with a 3-speed bike, worked myself up to a mountain bike, and now I have a hybrid bike, which is a lightweight bike, and certainly makes a difference when you're climbing hills. But you could start with any type of bike. We will support you and we will be there with you. Also, I might mention that there's also a Portland Senior Clinic on May 28th. That's in Portland, and we will be talking about seniors riding bicycles and also about senior safety. Let me talk a little bit more about the Beaverton Bicycle Safety Fair. That's been done through many years, and one of the things we do is we give away helmets. And this year we're going to be giving away about 600 helmets. So do come out if you can't afford to have a helmet, or you won't come out because you don't have a helmet and we won't be abiding with the law. We will make sure that you are safe and legally riding your bike. Also, if you want to ride with the Senior Rollers, just drop us a line at the website for the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, and we'll give you a call and put you on our email list and let you know when the rides are. We will be scheduling rides here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll have a schedule of rides we will be taking. We have done rides for example, we've taken, as I said, we've taken the light rail to downtown Portland from Beaverton and started at the Skidmore Fountain, gone across the waterfront trail there, across the Steel Bridge, across the Esplanade, and then onto the Springwater Trail all the way out to Gresham. So join us for a ride. Give us a call or look up the site at the website for the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tony. And now we are with Officers Mark Barrowcliff and James Patrick. They are with the Beaverton Bike Patrol. welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
We're glad that you could make it. Well, spring is here and families are getting ready to get out and ride. And what can families do, or the parents do, to get ready and keep their families safe?
Well, Bruce, first of all, they need to get their bikes out and inspect them. Make sure everything's working correctly. Take them out, rinse them off, maybe spray them down with some Simple Green or some degreaser to get all the grime off. They've been sitting in the sheds and the garages collecting dust and all that stuff. Clean them up, wipe them down, and then inspect them. Make sure the brakes work. Make sure there's no missing pieces. There's enough air in the tires. The bikes fit, and there's nothing that's wrong. And fix those problems. If you need to take it to a bike shop, there's a local bike shop. Some of the things you might be able to fix yourself. Someone might have training wheels that need to be tightened or taken off. Just do a real thorough inspection on them to make sure they're safe.
Make sure there's no loose nuts and bolts. And basically, you've described what the League of American Bicyclists call the ABC Quick Check.
Correct.
And that was air, brakes, cranks, and quick releases if you happen to have quick releases and not the cantilever bikes with the $100 bikes, that is.
Yeah, Bruce, it's real worth taking the extra time inspecting your kid's bike and alone your bike also, because you're riding it and you want to be safe.
Go ahead, Ann.
Oh, I was just because my husband recently told me a story about when he was a kid and the headset would like come off while he was riding his bike, and well, I guess he lived to tell about it, but we don't want that happening to our kids. A quick check is well worth it.
I had the old banana seat bike, the bike seat just keep going down also. So.
Well, I've always heard that you should probably, and you mentioned getting your bike checked by a bike shop, that having your bike inspected or tuned up every other year, and maybe an overhaul on the more expensive bikes every other year, and that kind of keeps your bike tuned up and safe for you as well. Does that sound like?
And that's true, and you can save a lot of money by preventing some of the high expensive maintenance problems that a bike shop can fix for you. So, but take the time and wipe it down so the bike shops can see what the problems are. Save some extra money too.
Do you see kids in your neighborhood that seem to maintain their bikes on a pretty regular basis, or what's the
Well, I have
trend
quite a
out
few of
there?
my neighbors come over to my house and I end up fixing their bikes. But so yeah, it's just take the time. Every bicycle that comes over, usually there's something wrong with it. Most of it's just being dirty, and more likely, if a bike is clean, they'll be out there riding it, and if it's safe, it'll be safer for everybody.
Now, what are the main things that parents can do to keep their kids safe when they're out riding on their bikes?
Well, one is know where your kids are going to be riding. Ride with them. Take them out and show them some of the hazards in the neighborhood. Every kid is going to be at a different level when they're riding. You can have an 8-year-old that can barely ride a bicycle, or you can have a 3-year-old that is up and down the hills.
That's
You
true.
never know. I mean, you can have 2 8-year-olds. We do bicycle rodeos all the time, and you can have a group of 15 kids, and all 15 kids are at a different level. So it's hard to judge. But take your kid out and explain where the hazards are, where they can ride. You can ride in this cul-de-sac. You can ride between this mailbox and this mailbox. You can only ride at a park. But talk to them. Talk to them about some of the hazards. Cars backing out of the driveway, mailboxes. Any of the hazards that's in your neighborhood or where they're riding.
Now, Tony mentioned the bicycle safety fair, the Beaverton Bicycle Safety Fair, that's coming up on May 17th, and that's going to be held at the PAL Club. Now, I know you've participated in those over the years because Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, Beaverton Optimist Club, and the Beaverton Police Department and PAL Club have had a long-standing relationship when it comes to bike safety and putting on these events. Now, are you going to be there this year?
We're going to be there putting on a little bicycle skills course for the kids. It's more of just getting the kids out, riding through cones, and talking with them and interacting with them. Like I said, every kid's going to be at a different level, and some kids can be riding through it fine, and other kids are going to need a little bit of work. So
now, you've also have been very instrumental in putting together a bicycle skills rodeo kit. And can you tell us a little bit about that and how that can work for people?
At the Beaverton Police Department, the chiefs allowed us to go out and do quite a few bicycle rodeos every year, but we can't make to all of them. just because we don't have time, and there's a lot of the smaller ones, it's just not feasible for us to make it. So we've designed this kit where you could take the kit home, go through the manual, set up the cones and all the explanations in there on how to do it, and run a bicycle rodeo for your neighborhood or your pack or Girl Scout group. Or
So this would be for smaller groups. Now, can a person that lives in a cul-de-sac, and let's say they have 5 or 6 kids and they want to have a little skills rodeo, can those parents borrow that kit as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Take it, there's no charge for it. Set up the course. If you have questions, you or I can help them out and set it up, and it should be a good learning, fun experience for everybody.
Now, another part of keeping your kids safe would be to have all of the equipment that's required. Now, my understanding is that under 16, a helmet's required, for example.
It's required by law that on a scooter, on a bicycle, kids wear helmets. And parents can actually be fined for kids not wearing their helmets.
Tony mentioned there's going to be 600 helmets given out at the Beaverton Bicycle Safety Fair, and there are a lot of such fairs all over the state. So there doesn't seem to be a good reason for a person not to be without a helmet.
Right. One thing I didn't mention before was when you bring out your bike and you're cleaning up, inspect the helmet too. Helmets for kids are usually only good for a year to 2 years. One, kids are hard on their helmets. They outgrow them really quickly, and they don't last a long time.
Yeah.
You have to take care of their helmet and make sure it's safe. You want that helmet as safe as it can be for your child and yourself.
I'd like to mention that the Beaverton Police Department, the Beaverton Optimist Club, and the Trauma Nurses Talk Tough, and the Portland Wheelman Touring Club supply helmets along with the Northwest Bicycle Safety Council. And these are safety-rated helmets, aren't they?
Yeah, they're safety rated, and they're approved to be out on the street.
Now, Ann, you've had some involvement with taking kids on kids rides and things, and that seems like that would be a good part of something that people could belong to as well. How do they connect to that?
Well, through Portland Wheelman Touring Club, I lead family rides, and we just ride on trails. We don't go out in the street, because I think that's a little overwhelming for a kid, and the state of the right and all that is just too much for a kid. So we do a lot of the trails, like the Springwater Corridor, the downtown trails, the Willamette Greenway, things like that, and encourage parents. Well, the parents have to come along, so it just kind of facilitates parents going cycling with their children and teaching them how to ride safely, making sure those helmets are on their heads correctly. I'm sure that's part of the fair is, you don't just buy a helmet, you make sure that it's going to fit snugly on that head so that if it hits the ground, that helmet does its job. And just pointing out problems like railroad tracks, how a wheel can get caught in a railroad track and make you tumble to the ground, things like that. So it's just working with the parents and the kids, and it's a lot of fun. So once they get some skills at the rodeos or the fairs or whatever, then they can come out with their folks and do a few miles of riding with a group.
Absolutely. When I get a bunch of kids together, I ask them, one of the questions is, where's the most dangerous place to ride a bicycle? Most of them say in the street. Well, then I say, okay, what about a sidewalk? Well, yeah, there's some dangers on the sidewalk, they say. What about car backing up? Oh, yeah. And the mailboxes and trees and all kinds of stuff. So you let them know everywhere you ride, it's dangerous.
That's true.
So let them know of all the hazards and what's around there. The railroad tracks, the trees, cars backing out of the driveway. And
It's kind of a part of being aware of your surroundings is kind of what I'm hearing. What are some of the other things the questions that kids come up with about safe riding?
a lot of it is, is the bike going to be safe for me to ride? Is it big enough? Is it too small? Where should I ride? Most of it is talk to your parents. Let your parents know what your concerns are and discuss it with them.
You said something very important, having the right size bike, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult. I noticed one of my neighbors, her kid is now a youth and no longer a toddler, and I've noticed he was having a real difficult time riding this little tiny bike. He said, yeah, I think I need to get him another bike because he's grown so much. I said, yes, and he's struggling on it. So if you don't have the right kind of bike, you're not going to be very safe on that if it's the wrong size. Let's say, for example, it's too big.
Yep. Get a lot of hand-me-down bikes from a bigger brother or sister, And that's the exact same thing. Kids are growing so quick. I have a little 8-year-old at home, and he wants to jump up to the bigger bike, but he's comfortable on the smaller bike and goes back and forth. So, you know, a lot of it's up to the kid also.
You mentioned hand-me-downs. We don't hand down helmets, do
Correct.
we?
When we do our bicycle rodeos, we have them trade in their helmets. Okay, we don't want to put a helmet out there that's not going to be safe. So we end up taking those helmets and throwing them away.
Now, we haven't heard from Officer Patrick, and I'd like to know, what is your take on this when it comes to what you observe with kids riding out on the roads? Are they riding safe, or do we need more education?
You know, being new to the program, I'm about 3 months into the program. I haven't got to go to a lot of the rodeos and teach and really see what's going on out there, but I can tell you what happens in my neighborhood. And, you know, you got kids without helmets, you got kids that their bikes are too small. It's definitely something that needs to be addressed. And I think, personally, I think the helmet thing is the biggest issue. You know, if the bike breaks, well, that's an issue, but if a head breaks, it's not so good.
So what are some of the rules of the road that you observe that people are not observing out there?
Well, there's quite a few riding on the wrong side of the road. In bike lanes, you'll see a lot of cyclists go in the wrong direction in a bike lane. When they do that, all the signals are backwards, and people aren't expecting them coming the wrong way. As a cyclist, you have to obey pretty much the same laws as a car. So ride a bicycle like you're driving a car for the most part. Stop for the stop signs. Signal when you can signal safely. If you're riding at night, you have to have the appropriate lights. And ride and be safe, be predictable.
The Oregon Department of Transportation puts out the Oregon Bicyclist Manual. These manuals are free. You can go on ODOT's website and have one sent to you, or you can go on www.nwbicyclesafetycouncil.org, and we'll make sure that you get one. I've kind of taken a survey over the years and asked cyclists how many have read this manual. And I'm hard-pressed to find very many out of all the years that I've asked that question. Now, even though we're cyclists, we drive, and we're pedestrians too, quite often, many of us are. And there's also the Oregon Driver's Manual, which has some bicycle safety law in it, and it gives the motorists an idea of what their responsibilities are and what the bicycle rights are when they encounter one another on the roadway. I mean, how often have you, yesterday, I'll just use yesterday as an example. A bunch of us, we're now a pedestrian, acting as pedestrians, going across the street in a crosswalk. And a motorist kept coming at us, and I kept saying, you know, stop, stop. And he does one of these. I want to know, what does that mean, and how much is that going to help me if I'm injured? Because if that person had hit me, I'm going to lose. Fortunately, we were with a group, and I believe it's safety in numbers, but he didn't care. So the matter is that if you don't know the law, you can't obey the law. If you don't read this manual, straw poll. How many people have read this manual within the last 30 years? And I'm going to tell you, there are people that have gotten their driver's license 30 years ago, and they've never cracked the page on it. It's free. We'll send you one. In fact, if you're local, I'll bring you one. But please read that so that you know what the rules of the road are, so that you can obey the rules. Now, there's bike etiquette, too, when you're out there riding.
Right. You know, it's kind of the same thing as, you know, driving in a car. You know, be paranoid, be seen, and be predictable. You know, and you know, let people know that you're coming up. Let people, hey, I'm coming up on your left, I'm passing on your right. Let them know, so you don't scare pedestrians, other bicyclists, and let them know what's going on.
There's a special training program that you undergo in order to be a bike patrol officer, isn't there?
We teach a 32-hour police mountain biking class, and it's not really to teach officers how to ride a bike, it's how to do police work from a bicycle. We're teaching them how to crash and not hurt themselves. We're teaching them how to do traffic stops, how to contact people and stay safe, and how to do everything we do as police officers from a bicycle, because it is different.
And so that brings us to our next topic. So what do you actually do as bike patrol officers?
We're out there. We do everything that an officer will do in a police car, except that we do it on a mountain bike. We do actually more. We can get to places where a patrol car can't. We end up spending a lot of time in parks, Nature Park, the transit centers where cars are hard getting in and out, behind malls, all over the back roads and trails and places where police cars can't go.
Now, I've seen bike patrol officers stopping people and checking for seatbelts. So that's another aspect. What kind of reaction do you get when you roll up on somebody and you're talking to them about a seatbelt and you're on a bicycle?
Years ago when we first started this, we used to get a lot of screams. People were scared of, oh my gosh. Now, we've been doing this for 10 years, and people are used to seeing police officers on a bicycle. They're doing it in Portland, they're doing it in Beaverton, Hillsboro's doing it, Washington County's doing it. So it's not a new thing anymore. We've been out there for a long time, and people are used to us out there stopping cars and contacting people, so it's not a surprise as it used to be.
Now, how do you stay safe on a bicycle? I mean,
That's what I like.
I think if you're doing a job and you have to concentrate on riding the bicycle and staying safe, just like we do. But you're thinking about, here's somebody without their seatbelt or whatever, and you're thinking of those things as well. How do you stay safe?
One, you have to multitask, and two, we wear our bright white shirts to stay visible. In the wintertime, we have yellow coats so people can see us. When I ride with 2-finger control. I ride with my fingers on the brakes all the time. So if something happens, I don't have to take the extra few hundredths of a second to stop and grab the brakes. It's instantaneously. You're scanning like you're doing in cars, a couple cars ahead. You're looking for someone doing something that's not normal, that they're going to cut you off, they're going to stop real quick. At least same things you do in a car.
Now, I see motorcycle officers out there, and so how does it differ with patrolling on the bike as versus patrolling on a motorcycle? I mean, it seems like the conditioning on the saddle would be about the same, but what are the other similarities?
We're out there doing a lot of traffic stops and contacting a lot of people. The motor officers are doing a lot of the freeway stuff, a lot of high-speed stops, school zones. For us, we're pretty limited on where we can stop cars. We're actually more effective when there's a lot of congestion in the roads. We can just ride right up to cars, ask people to pull over, and get in and out really easy.
So can you tell us about your bicycle? Give us kind of the nomenclature. I always hear police-equipped bicycle, but what does that mean?
It's a working bike. It's not the highest end. It's not the bottom. We just need something that's practical, going to be reliable. Right now we're using the Trek 7000s. We do upgrade, like we have the disc brakes in the front. As you know, bicyclists, the majority of your braking goes to the front, so that's important. We have the standard brakes in the back, just to offset it. As far as the lighting systems, we probably have a little more high-tech lighting system than most bicyclists. We have the red and blue flashers, white light, and of course the red to the tail. We also have an audible sound to it.
Is there a chance we can see the red and blue lights? Is that possible?
All right. This is Mark's bike, so there's
back
the red
here
and blue.
too.
So front and back.
That's effective.
Well, even the overheads in the car aren't enough as far as I'm concerned. And then of course we have just the white light up in the front, and then an irritating audible sound that's not near loud enough, which brings up another point. We do carry whistles. It's probably really valuable when we're doing traffic stops and just moving around. We have the fenders, they pop on. It's not a high tech, it's not that far off. It's, like I said, reliability is what we're really shooting for. Of course, we have the tote bag in the back. That's going to take all your site books, your reference materials, things like that.
Now, a lot of the cyclists I talk to have been, there's been some problems in the metro area, and it seems like motorists are getting more and more aware of cyclists. They're more and more courteous to cyclists. Do you find that to be true in the Beaverton area, that maybe there's been a little bit of a change in attitude the last year or so?
I think there are programs like this that let motorists know bicyclists are out there. I think there are, with gas prices, a lot more cyclists out there, and people are aware of the rules and what they need to do.
So what time of year do you start riding to get back into condition? As a cyclist, I know I can't just jump on my bike and go do 100 miles that I did last summer. So how do you work up to reconditioning yourself to ride?
Well, with us, fortunately, we ride year round.
Oh, you do?
So we're riding in the rain and, this year in the snow. Luckily, not very much. And then also nice weather. People actually make fun of us at work for when it's raining sideways and we're out there pedaling around. But here, like Sunday, when it was 80 degrees, that's like, oh man, you got the job. Take the good with the bad. But you're out there all the time. Stay saddle time. Go out there and pedal. Do your rides. Challenge yourself every once in a while about riding up and down some hills and the longer rides. But know what your limitations are and ride within them.
I noticed your battery. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This is the battery that's hooked up to our lighting system. And it's like a water bottle, but it just controls our lights. There's about a 10-hour life cycle on that before we need to recharge it. These are all LED lights, so they work very nice for us.
And I notice you have the big tires on them, and you can go through the mud and all sorts of. Can you ride on gravel pretty stable on gravel?
Right.
And I see bike patrol officers in not just Beaverton, in Portland and Vancouver, spinning on these. With these little pedals, what's the advantage to these pedals?
Those are just the standard clipless pedals. Our shoes lock into the pedals, and one, it's better for your knees, and two, you get pull up and down a continual circle motion while you pedal.
How many bike patrol officers would Beaverton have, for example, in a given time during the year?
Wintertime, there's just two of us. Summertime, we try to get another team out, if not two teams, doing extra details, and there's football games and stuff like that, and other special events where we'll get more bicycles out and riding.
Now, you mentioned that you can't get to all of the events and so forth, but how do people contact the Beaverton Police Department if they wanted to get information from you regarding bike safety or bike laws?
They can go on the city webpage, and they can contact us through the chief's office.
Now, do you ever carry flares and things like that in your bag?
We don't carry flares in there just because we're not riding that much out in traffic, and if there's an accident, we'll try to get a police car there just because of the overheads and it's safer. So we do carry, like Officer Patrick said, ticket books and handcuffs and extra paperwork and that sort of stuff in there.
I'd be interested in your nutrition, because if you're riding your bikes all year round, how do you keep your levels up and fit? I mean, what kind of nutrition program are you on?
It's eat frequently in smaller portions and drink lots of water. In summertime, I carry a Camelback with 100 ounces of water just to keep us hydrated, because there's days out there where it's 90, 100 degrees and you're out there riding around, and you got to stay hydrated.
Now, I believe a couple of years ago I saw a police van and it had bicycles on it, and I thought, oh, that must be the bike patrol. Then I saw a dozen bicycles hanging off this thing headed toward the Hillsborough Stadium. Where were you going, and what did you do when you got there?
We help teach a bunch of different things throughout the year, and it could have been a bicycle class, or we do a crowd control class from bikes. Could have been a bicycle rodeo, or helping out Hillsborough or another agency with an event.
Now, you mentioned maintaining your bikes, maybe taking it to a bike shop. Does the city have its own bike mechanics like it may have its own vehicle mechanics? Or?
Yeah, I'm doing all of our bicycle maintenance now. So we keep those up and running, and it's actually a lot cheaper for the city for us to do it a little bit here and there, instead of taking the time to take to a bike shop, have them fix it and bring it back. So
I noticed that in your on your front chain ring, that seems to be like a little small compact frame chain ring. Is that true, or is that something?
No, it's a standard that comes on the 7000 bike. There's nothing real special, high tech about these bikes. We're very hard on them. We end up throwing them down when we're doing police work. but they're sturdy. They last. They'll last us 4, 5, 6 years on this bicycle.
From what I've seen, it seems like it would be very difficult for a cyclist to outrun one of you guys on one of these. Have you ever had that?
Oh,
Maybe Mark. He might be able to get me.
over the years, there's been quite a few people, and you just ride slowly behind them until they get tired, and then they say, "Okay, I'm ready to go to jail." It's kind of funny. Some of the kids, it's like, well, how do you get people to jail? And you always tell them the joke of either we handcuff them to the bike and they have to run, their eyes get about this big old, or we tell them we drag them. But that's not true. We end up calling a police car. So.
Well, we've got about another minute before we wrap up. What other kinds of things? Well, I'm looking at this saddle. A lot of people say, how do you sit on those skinny saddles? I think they're quite comfortable personally. But what is your response to this WTB type saddles?
I like it. Well, we spend, 7, 8, 9 hours a day on this bike. A lot of it's stop and go, and we don't get, the miles on the bike that you think because it's all stop and go and talking to people. But, the C works for me. Find one that's comfortable for you.
Well, I appreciate having you on the show. I think it's been very informative. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers before we start our wrap-up?
Well, just make sure when you're out cycling, be seen, be paranoid, and be predictable.
I think that's a good advice. Well, Ann, we've got about a minute and a half, and so maybe you'd like to share with our viewers how they can see some replays on this show.
Well, you can. I've got to check my notes here. You can go to www.northwestbicyclesafety.org, and you can view these. Will be on the internet then, and there'll be some replays too. And I'm sure you can find that information at www.nwbicyclesafety.org.
Okay, and I'm going to correct you on that one because I'm going to have to repeat that website again, because if you want to get a copy of the motor vehicle manual, you can stop at any motor vehicle satellite office, and they have plenty of them there, and they're free. Pick up one, and you can go to ODOT's website and pick up one of these bicycle manuals. And this is a reminder to obey all laws, be aware of your surroundings, and please, please share the road.